James Whitfield had only been gone for one night. He and his wife, Dana, were on their annual camping trip in Ocala National Forest, a well-deserved break from their HOA-plagued suburban life. In West Pines, they loved their home, even if the HOA board felt more like a surveillance unit than a community council. Karen Whitmore, the self-elected president, treated the neighborhood like a private kingdom. Their trip had barely begun when James's phone buzzed. It was a motion alert from his home security system. He brushed it off. Maybe a squirrel, a wind, gust. But then came a second ping, this time from the front door lock. Someone had used a code to enter. James frowned. He hadn't given out his code to anyone. As Dana roasted marshmallows. James scrolled through the camera footage. What he saw made his blood freeze. Karen, wearing a glittery sash that read Fabulous 50, was entering his house with a crowd of people carrying folding chairs, wine bottles, and what looked like a fog machine. One man even had a karaoke machine tucked under his arm. James stared at the footage in disbelief. The cameras didn't just show them walking in. They had decorations, a speaker system. They were turning his living room into a full-on party zone. And not just a quiet gathering, it looked like the HOA's version of spring break. Dana leaned over his shoulder. Is that our fern on the porch in someone's arms? Someone had moved their plants. James's jaw tightened. I'm calling the cops. But Dana stopped him. Wait, what if this becomes something bigger? James's face slowly shifted from anger to calculation. A party in his house, without permission, by the very HOA that fined them last month for having a garden hose visible from the street. He checked the timestamps again. Karen had been in the house for 10 minutes. More guests were arriving. No signs of stopping. And that's when James had an idea. Ridiculous at first, but the more he thought about it, the more it felt poetic. I think it's time Carl paid them a visit. Dana blinked. Your crocodile? James smiled. Carl was a 9-foot-long American crocodile, rescued and raised under a special wildlife license. He lived in a custom-made pond in their backyard, usually lazing under sun lamps. Calm and less provoked, but certainly dramatic enough for this kind of message. They packed up the campsite and drove back toward West Pines. James called his neighbor, Miguel, who had a spare key to the side gate and had watched Carl before. Miguel, always ready for mischief, didn't ask questions. He just asked, where do you want me to put him? James paused. Open the chimney grate. I want them to feel the surprise. The plan was simple. No one would get hurt. Carl wasn't aggressive unless someone made the first move, but his presence alone would be enough to end the party, probably with a few people jumping into the pool in sheer panic. As they neared home, James checked the live camera again. Karen was on his white leather couch, wearing a tiara. Someone was roasting marshmallows inside the house using a mini torch. A beer bottle sat balanced on a framed photo of his grandmother. He didn't need the police. He needed proof. And Carl was the closing act. The neighborhood always liked gossip, but this time, they wouldn't just talk about the party. They'd talk about the moment the hoe crossed the wrong line. If you're wondering how this turns into one of the most talked about events in West Pines history, just keep watching. By the time James and Dana pulled into their driveway, the street outside looked like a pop-up carnival. Cars were double parked. Music pulsed from the walls, and the unmistakable scent of grilled shrimp and cheap perfume hung in the humid Florida air. Their porch light had been replaced with pink floodlights. James squinted. Was that a velvet rope tied to their mailbox? He parked down the street and cut the headlights. Dana gripped his arm. Are you sure Carl's okay with this? He's been cooped up for days, James replied, his voice low and deliberate. He needs enrichment. Across the lawn, Miguel gave a quick wave from the side gate. He had just finished guiding Carl along the stone pathway James had designed specifically for feeding time. The croc's claws tapped slowly against the stones as he moved toward the rear patio like an ancient scaly tank. His amber eyes blinked with reptilian calm. Inside the house, Karen stood in the kitchen holding a karaoke mic in one hand and a glass of sangria in the other. Her sash was crooked now, and her voice echoed across the living room as she belted out the chorus to an off-key Madonna song. People laughed. Someone tried to dance on James's coffee table. Another spilled guacamole into the heating vent. No. One noticed the strange scraping sound coming from the chimney. Not yet. James leaned against a tree, phone in hand, watching every camera feed with eerie calm. Almost there. He whispered, "Come on, Carl, inside." A sudden scratching sound drew the attention of a boy near the fireplace. He turned around, holding a plate of sliders. "What's that noise?" Before anyone could answer, a plume of ash burst from the hearth. The grate popped open, out slithered the scaly feet, then a tail, then jaws. Carl didn't roar. He didn't hiss. He simply emerged, slow and majestic, like a prehistoric king reclaiming his lair. His massive body stretched out into the living room, his eyes unblinking as he surveyed the crowd. Screams erupted. Karen dropped the microphone. The music cut. A guest launched themselves through the sliding door, knocking over a cake shaped like a champagne bottle. Someone else fainted onto the white rug. Red sangria splashed across the floor as people scrambled for the nearest exit. Carl, unfazed, paused to examine the spilled dip, flicked his tongue, and kept crawling. James whispered, "And the party is over." Dana smirked. "You really just sent a crocodile into our house." "He lives here," James said. "They don't." Miguel, who had discreetly locked the side gate again, strolled back to the sidewalk and stood with them. "So, what now?" "Now we filmed the exit," James said, flipping his phone to record mode. Out the front door came a stream of fleeing partygoers. One woman screamed about her heels being broken. Another shouted something about losing her vape to HOA board. Members leaped over a row of shrubs, one of them clutching a cheese platter, and last came Karen. Her tiara was gone, her hair wild, and her sash ripped in half. She stood on the front porch frozen, staring into the lens of James's phone for a split second. The two of them locked eyes. "You're trespassing," James said. Karen opened her mouth to speak, then turned and fled down the lawn, slipping in a puddle of spilled punch and landing squarely in a long flamingo display that hadn't been there. When James left, later that night, James uploaded the entire sequence from his security system. The break-in, the decorations, the guests. The moment Carl made his appearance to a shared neighborhood page called West Pines Watchdog. He didn't add captions. The video spoke for itself. By morning, it had been downloaded, copied, and posted on multiple neighborhood Facebook groups. Someone even added dramatic music and slow motion, but James wasn't done. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about drawing the line. Karen and the HOA had gone too far, and now they learned what it meant to be held accountable. The party was over, but the real showdown was just beginning. By 8 a.m., the neighborhood had split into two sides, those laughing about the crocodile eviction and those too embarrassed to admit they had been there. But no one was more furious than Karen Whitmore. She stormed into the HOA office that morning wearing dark sunglasses, a turtleneck despite the July heat, and a neck brace that she insisted was from crocodile-related trauma. Her voice echoed off the walls as she barked at the assistant to bring in the HOA legal liaison immediately. "They're going to pay for this," Karen hissed. "He sent a wild animal into my face." "You broke into his house," the assistant mumbled. Not meeting her eye, Karen's hand slammed on the desk. "It was an HOA-sanctioned gathering. I'd had board approval only," she did in single quotes. James knew that already. He had filed a formal police report for trespassing and property damage. But instead of waiting for it to escalate legally, Karen jumped. First, she submitted a complaint to animal control, claiming James endangered the lives of dozens of innocent residents by unleashing an aggressive reptile in a residential zone. James received the notice the following morning. Dana read it out loud while sipping coffee. She says Carl chased her across the living room, snapping his jaws, and that he growled like a tiger. James nearly choked on his eggs. Carl doesn't even have vocal cords, but the county took complained seriously, especially when they involved exotic animals. Within 48 hours, James had an inspection scheduled with Florida Wildlife Enforcement Services. Dana was nervous. What if they think Carl's dangerous? He's licensed. His permits are in order, and he's cleaner than most of our neighbors. Still, when the state officials arrived, two men in khaki uniforms with notebooks and tranquilizer gear, James didn't take any chances. He calmly introduced Carl in his sun-heated enclosure, walked them through feeding procedures, and even showed videos of Carl lounging beside their golden retriever during barbecue nights. The officials were impressed, but then came the twist James didn't see coming. One of the officers checked the clipboard. Funny thing is, this inspection wasn't originally scheduled for you. It was for 421 Magnolia Drive. James blinked. That's Karen's house? Yeah. Anonymous report. Flagged it for possible wildlife violations. Someone said there were exotic animals being kept indoors, unlicensed. But when we saw your name attached to this mess, we figured we'd knock out the visits. James's curiosity burned. So, what did you find at hers? The officer chuckled. Can't disclose that officially, but if we were to find a family of unregistered sugar gliders living in a bedroom closet next to illegal fireworks, well, that wouldn't be good. James barely concealed his grin. The officer added, her place smells like a jungle gym soaked in vodka. You're clean though, well kept, fully compliant. Honestly, the Croc's the most responsible one on the block. They left with no fines, no warnings, and a few selfies with Carl for their department bulletin board. By afternoon, the neighborhood was buzzing again, not just about the Crocodile party crash, but about what Karen might be hiding. Rumors spread fast. One neighbor claimed Karen was breeding illegal birds. Another swore they saw a monkey in her attic window. James didn't confirm or deny anything. He just posted a single sentence on the West Pines Watchdog forum. Funny how people who cry the loudest have the messiest houses. That post got over 100 likes in an hour. Later that evening, while walking Carl along the fence line, James noticed Karen's house dark and silent. The party queen was quiet for once. Her lawn, once perfectly manicured, looked slightly overgrown. The pink flamingo decor had vanished, but James knew this was only temporary. Karen didn't give up. She plotted, and he suspected her next move wouldn't be a letter or a lawsuit. It would be personal. James gave Carl a scratch under the jaw. What do you think, buddy? Want to stick around a few more days? Carl blinked lazily, because what came next wasn't a party. It was a full-blown war. 2 days of silence from Karen felt unnatural. For a woman who once wrote a 3-page violation letter over a basketball hoop, her sudden retreat made the entire neighborhood uneasy. James wasn't fooled. He installed 2 more outdoor security cameras and connected them to a live stream app that auto-uploaded everything to a private cloud. Carl had been moved inside temporarily, sunning himself in the guest room bathtub, while Dana ordered an extra "Beware of Reptile" sign just in case. Karen's planning something, Dana said while watching the front yard through the window. You don't just throw a party in someone's house, exposed to the government departments, and then go silent. James nodded. She's cornered. That makes her dangerous. On the 3rd day, just after noon, it started. The neighborhood group chat lit up with an urgent message from Karen. Emergency at the Whitfield residence. Hold business. Possible gas leak. Calling in for a safety inspection. All neighbors stay clear. Dana read it twice. A gas leak. She's setting the stage, James muttered, grabbing his phone and heading to the garage. 5 minutes later, a white van pulled up. 2 men in gray uniforms stepped out. One carried a black tool bag. The other had a clipboard. They weren't from the gas company. No logos. No equipment beyond what looked like locksmith gear and a crowbar wrapped in cloth. James remained in the shadows of his garage, phone in hand, quietly filming. One camera captured the men walking toward his front door. Another caught Karen rounding the corner, dressed in oversized sunglasses again, waving her phone like she was directing traffic. Yep, James whispered. There she is. Karen walked straight up to the men and pointed at the door. Her voice, even from 20 feet away, carried, "She's out of town. I'm HOA president. I have emergency authority. I think there's a leak. It's a risk to the whole block. Just pop the lock fast." James flicked on the speaker linked to his doorbell cam. "Smile, Karen," he said through the intercom. "You're live in front of 147 viewers, and every second is going to the police." Karen froze mid-sentence. The men looked at each other, startled. One muttered, "You didn't say anyone was home." Karen backpedaled. "He's bluffing. There's a gas leak. Just go ahead. Touch that lock." James interrupted again. "Your next party's going to be in the courtroom." The live stream counter ticked up to 230 viewers. Someone had already clipped the part where Karen called it emergency HOA business. In the neighborhood Facebook group, comments exploded. Miguel posted, "This is the dumbest heist in HOA history. Where's the popcorn emoji?" The locksmiths didn't wait for more drama. They turned around, mumbling something about not wanting legal problems, and jogged back to the van. The engine revved, and they were gone in seconds. Karen stood alone on the porch. Then she spotted James walking slowly down the driveway with his phone in hand, still recording. "You want to explain the fake gas leak?" he asked, his voice level. She pointed a shaky finger. "You endangered me. That crocodile could have killed me. You broke into my house. I have security footage, animal control reports, and now this footage of you faking a public safety emergency. You're done, Karen. I was protecting the community." James stepped closer. "No, you were protecting yourself from embarrassment. You couldn't stand that you were the joke of the neighborhood, so you tried to flip the narrative." Karen glanced toward the street, realizing more neighbors were watching, now some through windows, others stepping out onto their porches. The woman across the street held a phone up and was clearly recording. James turned to face the invisible audience. If the whole board won't remove her, maybe the entire neighborhood needs to show up at the next meeting. Karen paled. James leaned closer and added quietly, "Walk away now, Karen, before someone calls the fire marshal about that suspicious stash of fireworks in your attic." Karen didn't respond. She stepped off the porch, heels clicking against the stone path, and disappeared around the hedges. That night, James's live stream reached over 10,000 views. The HOA board received more than 60 emails demanding an emergency vote for new leadership, and Karen, she didn't log into the group chat again. But James knew this wasn't over. People like Karen never quit quietly. By Friday morning, a manila envelope was left taped to James's front door. Dana found it while watering the azaleas. She brought it in, placed it on the kitchen table without a word, and waited. James opened it carefully. Inside was a thick packet of legal documents stamped by the county clerk's office. Karen had filed for a restraining order. According to her sworn affidavit, James was a dangerous neighbor with a known history of psychological manipulation and exotic animal threats. She claimed she feared for her safety, that he'd followed her, filmed her, and unleashed a predatory reptile with the intent to traumatize her permanently. "I'm almost impressed," Dana muttered. She rewrote the whole story and cast herself as the damsel. James sighed, flipping through the pages. "She's trying to discredit me before the board vote next week." The restraining order hearing was set for Monday. It wasn't just a legal move, it was a calculated smear campaign. If granted, James would be prohibited from coming within 100 feet of Karen's house, or attending the home meeting where the motion to remove her would be voted on. Miguel, after reading the court docs dropped by that night, "You realize what she's doing, right? This isn't about safety. She's trying to eliminate you from the HOA board meeting so she can control the vote. If you can't show up, she wins by default." James nodded. "Which is why I'm going to court with receipts for the next 2 days." James gathered every piece of digital proof he had: security footage, audio logs, witness statements. Dana even compiled screen captures from the neighborhood group chat showing Karen bragging about using whole emergency powers for personal gain. But the real key, that came from an unexpected place. 2 weeks prior, James had installed a new porch microphone with wind filtering and ambient recording. It captured long-distance audio more clearly than most people realized. Dana had insisted on it after a neighbor's dogfight ended with conflicting stories. On a hunch, James reviewed the audio from the day Karen tried to fake the gas leak. He skipped past the obvious shouting and crosstalk until he heard her say something nearly lost. Under the hum of cicadas, "Just pick the lock. It's fine. He's out of town and won't know. I'll say it was for public safety. If anyone finds out, I'll cry harassment." James replayed the clip. Then again, there was, clear as glass. He spliced it, burned it to a flash drive, labeled it Exhibit A Monday morning. James stood before the judge in a small county courtroom. Karen sat across from him in a beige blazer with pearl earrings and a strategically applied wrist brace. She wept as she told the judge about how James terrorized her with cold eyes and crocodiles, how he weaponized surveillance, how she could no longer sleep without checking her locks twice. The judge listened politely, flipping through the paperwork. Then it was James's turn. He laid out his evidence without theatrics. First, the break-in footage, then the live stream of Karen coordinating the fake emergency. Finally, he played the audio clip. The courtroom went quiet. Even Karen's attorney shifted uncomfortably in his chair. James finished calmly, "Your Honor, I didn't harass Karen. I documented her. That's the difference. She made herself a victim of her own decisions." The judge looked down at her notes, then back up at Karen. Double quotes Ms. Whitmore. "Do you deny saying this was a setup to manipulate perception?" Karen's jaw clenched. She tried to stammer out an excuse about sarcasm, context, and emotional exaggeration. But the damage was done. The restraining order was denied on the spot, outside the courthouse. Karen refused to make eye contact as she walked past James, but he didn't need a confrontation. He'd won. And now he was free to attend the whole emergency vote that Thursday, where Karen's role as president would finally be challenged in front of a crowd of fed-up neighbors. Dana leaned in as they walked back to the car. "Think she'll show up to the meeting?" James smirked. "She might, but she won't bring a crocodile." Thursday night came heavy with tension. The HOA's emergency meeting wasn't just another dull evening of budget reports and fence paint discussions. This one had teeth. Flyers had gone out. Posts lit up the local Facebook group. Neighbors who hadn't attended a meeting in years now rearranged dinner plans. Folding chairs lined the clubhouse walls, and every seat was filled. Dana and Miguel sat near the back. Carl, of course, was home watching Animal Planet. Karen showed up 10 minutes late, walking with an exaggerated limp and a man by her side. The stranger was tall, polished, and oozed confidence. He wore a suit a little too expensive for a neighborhood meeting, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. James spotted them instantly. Dana leaned over. "Who's that?" "Another lawyer." "No, she's too smug for that," James said. "She brought someone to flip the room." Karen took her place at the head table and tapped the mic. "Before we begin the vote, I'd like to welcome a guest, Mr. Adrian Stone, HOA legal consultant. He's here to explain the serious liability concerns that may come from removing me as president without proper legal counsel." Gasps rippled through the room. A few neighbors looked confused, others looked impressed. Adrian stood and spoke with the rhythm of someone who'd done this before. He warned about lawsuits, regulatory delays, and the risk of internal collapse if board leadership was changed hastily. Karen folded her arms and smiled like a queen who just defended her throne. James watched silently. Something felt off. He pulled out his phone and did what Karen never expected. He Googled the guy. Within minutes, he had all the proof he needed, and it wasn't just damning, it was perfect. When the floor opened for public comments, James stood slowly. "I'd like to thank Karen for bringing in expert help," he said, "but I think we all deserve to know who Mr. Stone really is." The room quieted again. James turned his phone toward the projector and cast Adrian's LinkedIn profile onto the clubhouse wall. "This man isn't a licensed legal consultant. He was disbarred in 2016 for forging signatures on real estate contracts." He's not affiliated with any HOA regulatory board. In fact, last month, he was cited in Jacksonville for impersonating an attorney. Karen's face turned pale. James continued. And if anyone wants more context, he's also Karen's second cousin. Same last name before she married. Same mailing address 6 years ago. So unless this board is comfortable taking legal advice from a disgraced family member who's banned from courtrooms, he let the silence hang. Adrian's smile cracked. This is irrelevant personal information. One of the board members cut him off. Sir, please leave. Karen stood up in protest, but no one listened. Neighbors were already murmuring, some even laughing. Adrian grabbed his briefcase and stormed out without another word. Karen was left standing alone, surrounded by a sea of narrowed eyes. The board president, a no-nonsense woman named Linda Garrison, tapped her gavel. Let's proceed with the vote. Ballots were passed. People scribbled silently. 5 minutes later, Linda read the result. By majority decision, Karen Whitmore is hereby removed from her position as HOA president. Effective immediately. Cheers erupted. A few neighbors clapped. Someone shouted finally. Karen stood frozen. Her hands shook as she gripped her folder. For a second, she looked like she might object again. But then, she turned and left, shoving a chair on her. Way out. James sat back down. Heart steady. Dana whispered, "You just buried her with a search engine." He smiled. All it takes is one lie too many. That night, back at home, James opened a bottle of wine while Carl floated peacefully in his pond. Miguel dropped by with a pizza and a fresh HOA newsletter already updated to reflect new leadership. But James wasn't celebrating yet, because the next morning, an anonymous email would arrive. No name, no subject line, just one sentence in a blurry photo. She's not done, and she's not alone. Friday morning arrived with a faint buzz in the air, the kind that clings to the skin before a storm. James stepped outside with his coffee, barefoot and groggy, only to freeze halfway across the porch. He blinked, then blinked again. His backyard looked like a battlefield. Carl's pond had been slashed open. Water flooded across the patio tiles, soaking through the mulch beds and carrying broken pieces of ceramic into the lawn. The custom-built sun deck James had spent a year perfecting laying shattered splinters. Flower beds were ripped to dirt, solar lights smashed. Even the wrought iron bench was bent sideways, as if someone had jumped on it. But worst of all, Carl was missing. James's chest went cold. He dropped the mug. It shattered across the porch. "Carl!" he shouted. Dana appeared behind him, still in her robe. Her eyes widened. "What the hell?" He didn't answer. He leapt down the stairs and sprinted toward the empty pond. It was then he saw it along the edge of the muddy slope. Carved sloppily with a stick or metal rod were 3 crude letters, K plus Miamis, knelt slowly. The groove was fresh, the mud still moist. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a message. Dana hovered beside him, breath shallow. "Karen, and who's them?" He didn't say it out loud. He didn't have to. His phone buzzed in his pocket. No caller ID. He answered on instinct. A disguised voice spoke through static. "Cute reptile. Be a shame if he ended up in the wrong neighborhood. You pushed too far. Whitfield." Then silence. James stood slowly, his entire body rigid. This wasn't just Karen throwing a tantrum. This was premeditated. She hadn't acted alone. Dana pulled him aside. "We call animal control. Wildlife rescue. Hell, the news. Somebody will find Carl." "No," James said. "That's exactly what they want. Public attention. They want to bait me into a meltdown before I've cleared their influence off this HOA board." Dana's eyes searched his. "What are you going to do?" James's mind was already moving. He pulled out his phone, flipped through neighborhood security camera shares on the West Pines watchdog page, and sent out a silent ask. "Anyone got footage from midnight to 5 a.m.? Northside homes. Backyard views." Miguel arrived 20 minutes later holding a tablet. "Check this out. My neighbor across the fence has a motion camera facing west. Look who snuck out of Karen's garage at 2:17 a.m. He handed the screen to James. The video showed a shadowy figure wheeling a large canvas-covered crate on a dolly. Another person held a flashlight. Both wore dark hoodies. The crate had air holes. It was loaded into the back of an old blue pickup truck with an out-of-state plate. James paused the frame and zoomed in on the passenger's face. It was blurry, but not blurry enough. "That's Mitchell Fairbanks," James muttered. Dana blinked. "Who's Mitchell?" "Karen's nephew. Works maintenance for the HOA. He's the one who installed my front gate sensors last year." He's the M. James's hands tightened around the tablet. "This wasn't just a revenge stunt. It's coordinated. She's using her leftover HOA contacts to get around locks, access private property, maybe even erase surveillance trails." Dana looked worried. "We can call the police now, right?" James shook his head. "Not yet. They'll move Carl. He could end up in the swamp, or worse, sold." Instead, he had a different idea. That night, James made a new post in the neighborhood group. It didn't accuse. It didn't even mention Karen by name. It simply read, "If anyone sees a blue pickup with Florida plates and a large crate, DM me. No questions. Just want my family safe." And then, just to stir the pot, he added a blurry screenshot of Mitchell's face. Caption, "Recognize this man. Me too." The comments exploded. Anonymous accounts tried to discredit him, but others joined in, offering tips, sightings, rumors. Someone mentioned a truck like that parked near the old abandoned tennis courts, at the edge of the neighborhood property, technically outside HOA jurisdiction. James leaned back in his chair, found our next stop. He stood, grabbed his flashlight, and reached for the old crate of tools marked Swamp Projects. Dana called after him. "What if it's a trap?" James didn't slow down. "It's not a trap," he said. "It's war." Karen tried to play it cool at the emergency board meeting. She wore sunglasses indoors, claimed her injury was due to slipping on pool tiles, and ignored the local news van parked outside. But the neighborhood wasn't buying it. Photos had surfaced. Grainy images of a writhing tail sliding down James's chimney, followed by Karen sprinting half-dressed through the bushes behind his home. James sat quietly at the back of the whole clubhouse, sipping sweet tea while recording everything with a discreet GoPro clip to his baseball cap. He'd already forwarded the footage to his lawyer, uploaded backups to cloud storage, and sent a version to a friend at the local paper, just in case. Across the table, Jason from Lot 12 stood and cleared his throat. "Madam President," he said, without an ounce of respect in his tone, "a number of residents would like to understand how exactly a private home was accessed without consent, used as a party venue, and then damaged during the, let's call it the reptile incident." Karen smirked, adjusted her scarf, and waved dismissively. "There was a clerical error with the key codes. We believe the house was scheduled for pest control, and pest control," James interrupted from the back. "So that's what you call 30 people, balloons, open alcohol, and a buffet table blocking my living room TV?" Everyone turned. Karen's fake smile twitched. "Homeowner concerns will be addressed after." "No," James said, standing now. "You don't get to keep hiding behind policy. This wasn't an accident. You picked the lock. You held a birthday party. You danced on my furniture in heels. And when my security system sent me footage of a flamingo papada in my kitchen, I handled it my way." An awkward silence fell over the room. Then, a soft chuckle. It came from Linda, the oldest resident in the community, and the one who'd once petitioned for a Karen-free HOA. "That crocodile's name is Carl," she said dryly, "and he has better manners than half this board." Laughter broke out. Karen stood up, furious. "You people are being ridiculous. The real crime is this man unleashing a dangerous animal. Do you want children to grow up thinking they can solve problems with jungle creatures? Well, I grew up with lawyers," James said, "so I solved mine with legal documents." He opened his backpack and dropped a folder onto the board's desk. "Cease and desist. Lawsuit pending. Trespassing, property damage, theft, illegal entry, emotional distress. Oh, and misuse of HOA funds because I checked the receipts. For the party supplies, Karen's face went pale. Linda clapped her hands together once. Meeting adjourned. In the weeks that followed, the HOA unraveled. Karen was voted out in a rare emergency recall. Her closest allies on the board resigned. Before the audits could begin, a new president was elected, Jason, the same neighbor who had once threatened to fine James for power washing his driveway at night. But Jason came by with an apology and brownies. James accepted both dives for Carl, the now famous Crocodile. His viral footage, complete with dramatic music and slow-motion partygoer panic, racked up over 7 million views. A wildlife sanctuary in Georgia offered him a lush retirement home, complete with a private lagoon and supervised swim sessions. James visited once a month. Carl always seemed to remember him. One afternoon, as James cleaned soot from his chimney, he found something stuck halfway down the flue, a glittery birthday tiara, crushed but still intact. He chuckled, tossed it in the trash, and headed inside. But not all echoes of that night were gone. A few weeks later, a knock came at his door. A delivery driver stood there with a legal envelope. Inside was a counter lawsuit. Karen was suing him for emotional trauma, public humiliation, and, bizarrely, crocodile-induced arthritis. James looked at the paperwork, shook his head, and turned to Carl's framed photo on the wall. "Round two, buddy," he muttered. "And somewhere, deep in a Florida swamp." Carl blinked slowly, as if he'd just heard the call.